ओवरसीज़ वीज़ा लेके एम्प्लॉयमेंट के लिए भेजेंगे, जबकि 1500
Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about the unfortunate scenes that were witnessed around the Lahore High Court premises. The lawyers in Lahore went on a rampage when one of their colleagues was issued non-bailable arrest warrants for being impolite or inappropriate with a judge, and we'll talk about that. And we've seen that the lawyers are acting like a mob in Lahore High Court, and is this the legitimate or legal way to protest? We will raise these questions in our program today. Joining me for the conversation, we have Yasir Latif Hamdani. He's a legal expert and a lawyer, and along with him we have a senior advocate from the Supreme Court, Mr. Ikram Chuadhry. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. I'll start with you, Yasir. It's not uncommon to see such scenes unfolding in the premises of various courts. So why is it that lawyers feel that they take the law into their own hands when they go on the rampage in such a, such a venue such as the Lahore High Court or any other court for that matter? How would you justify that?
Well, I don't justify it. I think it's an absolute failing on the part of our legal training, to the failure to inculcate the idea that a lawyer has to always conduct himself in accordance with constitutional methods. So I feel that what has happened in Lahore High Court is just another incident in a long list of incidents where the legal fraternity has gone beyond its bounds and has struck at that principle that we as advocates and officers of the court uphold, and that is the sanctity of the courts.
And the law.
And the law. And also the fact that we would not be the mob. In this case, unfortunately, my brothers in Lahore, the lawyers in Lahore, they've acted like a mob, and that is contrary to what I understand to be the calling of the profession of law. So I absolutely am disappointed, and if it helps, I would call upon my brothers to actually back down and...
Would you condemn this incident?
Absolutely, absolutely, without question. No uncertain terms, because we have to, this kind of hooliganism cannot continue, and we cannot call ourselves the guardians of law and order and the rule of law as lawyers, is something that we've very proudly proclaimed ourselves to be. If we are going to continue to take law in our own hands, and this is what they've done. The methods of a lawyer are sound reasoning and argument. It should never be resorting
Physical
to violence, any kind of violence. Yes.
Ikram Saab, you've had a very long illustrious career in the law profession. How many such episodes in your long career have you witnessed? And what has been your sort of impression about it, and how have you taken it in over the 70 years history of our country? There are innumerable such instances where the lawyers have gone berserk in the court premises, and many others.
Thank you very much. Basically, these incidents are definitely not pleasant. They are not a healthy sign in the department. Over the years, almost more than 3 decades, I have been in the profession. During past 10 to 15 years, the number of incidents definitely has grown upward, and it's unhealthy in any case. Now we have to look into the area where the problem would ultimately be examined for the purposes of reaching at a conclusion as to why this has started taking a certain shape which it shouldn't, because we are a community for rule of law and supremacy of constitution, and of course a discipline wherein definitely the courts as well as the bar associations and the bar councils, they have to play a role. This latest incident, as a matter of fact, at Multan, the informations personally I have gathered, there was, as a matter of fact, as per I received the information, I must say from the horse's mouth, some of the gentlemen, they had visited Supreme Court of Pakistan a couple of days ago, and I was just talking to them as to how it cropped up. Mr. Qasim was the judge. Indeed, he overacted. Maybe there was a bit of shouting. That's not expected in the courtroom. Normally, there is a restraint from the judicial side. Normally, there is a restraint. Although, I would expect that the bar and the members of the bar would behave in the same manner and should. There is no option other than that. There is no way out, really, to see that the department works in a disciplinary manner. I think it was because of that when ultimately some of the lawyers were asked to leave the courtroom. So I think the matter became a bit, I must say, complicated. There was definitely a protest in the bar. This is not expected. I would not say that it was the president of the bar, since he was there and some of the office bearers, other senior lawyers were there. It hardly matters. A counsel, when he is before the court, he is a counsel, not to be taken care of as a member of the elected bodies. So a notice was taken by the Chief Justice of Lahore High Court, and Mr. Mansoor Ali Shah, indeed we, speaking for myself, it has been commonly observed that there was tension since beginning. The gentleman took over as Chief Justice of the Lahore High Court. Not very healthy relation between the bar and the bench. Unfortunately, in the bars and to some extent in the judicial circles too, a certain trend has developed over these recent years, wherein some sort of, as they say, prestige, maybe a point of prestige. And when it comes to that, you know, it normally creates difficulties in interrelations of the communities.
So you're saying that this is basically an ego battle or a battle of egos?
At the moment. As a matter of fact, there have been contempts, and these days, unfortunately...
But isn't there a law to be followed, a certain etiquette or a certain decorum which is followed by everybody who is in a courtroom?
Of course. But I would just mention a few instances, rather so many of them these days. There have been abusive languages, comments, and the criticism of the nature we never witnessed about the judges, about the Supreme Court judges, about the judges otherwise. And I think restraint has been exercised, particularly by the Supreme Court of Pakistan in the given circumstances, as you know. Because if you start taking notice of everything, then bitterness would definitely develop, and it may ultimately affect the whole mechanism of the working of the institution, which is established for the purposes of justice and fair play, etc. So what happened at Lahore, that a warrant of arrest to the president and whosoever was the next, etc. And normally there are notices to the concerned parties. And thereafter, a certain reply is sought, explanation is sought as per practice over the years in Supreme Court, High Court, and otherwise. Thereafter, if there is a tangible reason or cause, of course, show cause notice of the contempt. And thereafter, the contempt proceedings, of course, in accordance with law, evidence, etc., etc., etc. Unfortunately, as observed by me, I think Lahore High Court, Chief Justice, and of course, the learned judges and the bench, they acted in a little post-haste and closed the doors of the courts at Multan and certain demarcations of the physical territories of the Multan bench. Many controversies cropped up later on. Then, of course, certain people at Lahore, they tried to intervene. I just learned today from a gentleman from Lahore that there was an effort by the Bar Council, and they waited for a couple of days to see the learned Chief Justice of the Lahore High Court, but he didn't meet them. So I think this particular attitude is going to disturb the whole phenomena. Today's incident, in which some of the lawyers have been injured, probably some report as per press, some of the policemen as well. Gate of the High Court, of course, that was also broken. Definitely these are not at all healthy signs.
Well, in your opinion, those individuals who have broken and damaged property of the court, should they be held accountable for their actions?
See, normally it should be, but you have always to see as to what is the cause of the whole incident. There should have been a proper inquiry for the purposes of this whole issue. And indeed, without going into the proper inquiry, the warrants of arrest and many more things, see, as I just stated, that over these past couple of decades, or a little less than that, there is some sort of development in the bar as well as in the bench, wherein instead of exercising certain restraint on either side, I must say, there have been, I must say,
that's like a very Donald Trump type of statement, saying that the problem was on many sides when we saw the violence in Charlottesville.
What happened, as a matter of fact, excesses, I must concede, excess at times in both sides. And I think it's high time that the Chief Justice of Lahore High Court should try to see as to how this whole issue can be resolved legally, of course, and amicably. See, we are a community for rule of law. Definitely there can be no second opinion regarding that. But unfortunately, when the things flare up as they have, then there is no bound, no limit to that.
If we look at a little about our recent past, and if it all started with the Chief Justice Iftikhar Chaudhry's reinstatement, there was a huge protest rally that was taken out, movement in fact that was created by the lawyers for his restoration. And once that took place, we saw an episode after an episode in quick succession of the complete lack of respect for the law on the part of the lawyers being displayed not on one but on several occasions, sir, not once. They've also they've outright committed criminal acts in the premises of the of the Lahore High Court, or any other court for that matter, which have been regularly broadcast on the media as well, sir. How can you condone such a thing?
As a matter of fact, I have gone through some of the incidents and I just tried to look into it as to why this was so. Let me be very frank. We cannot rule it out that there is indiscipline and financial as well as administrative corruption in certain quarters of the judiciary as well. And of course, my own community, to some extent, not all, they are also party to it, unfortunately. Now, all these things, when seen with the open eye and really you examine it in total perspective, then you will come to the conclusion, and that would be only one conclusion. When there is indiscipline, then definitely these incursions, excursions, and all sorts of unfortunate incidents may crop up. There have been certain incidents, of course, in the district courts and elsewhere too. I think it is high time. I have always stated it very frankly and straightforwardly. Starting from the Supreme Court of Pakistan to the lowest ebb of the judiciary, and from Pakistan Bar Council to the Tehsil Bar Association and Bar Councils, we have to look into the conduct and the discipline, and we have to take care of all those elements in accordance with law and the rules applicable on either side, so that these incidents, they don't spread like an epidemic. I think in certain areas the situation is cancerous, particularly in the lower judiciary. And of course in the lower ranks of the bar as well, we have problems, and these things are there. So I think just one incident may not be really an example to come to the true position as to who was and what was the cause and who was responsible and to what extent one was responsible and to what extent the other party was responsible. I just learned through a friend of mine in Multan that Mr. Qasim, the learned judge, because of whom or because of the bar, there was a controversy and ultimately this unfortunate incident of Lahore which took place today. I learned that the similar sort of attitudes and the conduct were being complained of about him at Multan. So I think the learned Chief Justice and the other all concerned, it is high time now that the responsibles from the bar and the bench both, they should come to a certain point and they should get together and they should resolve these issues. And of course, if there is really a contempt, move in accordance with law and of course applying all laws instead of creating a situation wherein everything becomes uncontrollable. I think will be then damaging the cause of the institution.
I think the cause has already been quite damaged if you look at the number of incidents that have escalated after the Chief Justice restoration. Yasir, what's your opinion on the matter? One very important point that was raised by Ikram Saab, and that was the issue of judicial reforms, which we've been hearing about for the past 5 years almost now, but nothing seems to have been done about it.
Right. In terms of, in terms of what happened in the Lahore High Court and with respect to this particular incident, obviously nobody's asking the lawyers to endorse whatever the Chief Justice of the Lahore High Court did in Multan bench. You know, there can be two opinions about it. But the first and most important issue in this is that if you have a disagreement with the judge, raise your voice, don't raise your hand.
Fists, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the basic principle. Now coming to the judicial reforms, I believe that a lot was done by the present Chief Justice of Lahore High Court in terms of forwarding the cause of justice. At least on the High Court level, one could see it. There were palpable signs of progress and reform that were coming forth. And I think, you know, it is my opinion. People might not agree with it, but I think Chief Justice Mansoor Ali Shah is one of our finest judges. And it's quite unfortunate the way things have gone down and the kind of sloganeering that is happening against him.
Again, there seems to be a politicization of the entire issue. So
Absolutely.
there seem to be some people at work who are trying to politicize this problem. Are they? Is there some, you know, conspiracy against the Chief Justice?
Well, this is what the question would be. I mean, first of all, in any civilized country, a person resorting to such physical violence, a lawyer resorting to such physical violence is usually disbarred. I mean, there's no question about it. You can have 100 grievances against the judiciary, but this is no way to conduct yourself. And I think that is something that hasn't happened here because of the regulatory capture of the bar councils in Pakistan. It is quite unfortunate that no complaints against lawyers' misconduct and unethical behavior are ever taken up by the Bar Council or taken to their logical conclusion. Now, the other question is, the Chief Justice had given the President of the Multan Lahore High Court Bar Association, Multan, he had been given opportunity to come to the court not once, not twice, but thrice. And he refused to come. Now, if our Prime Minister, who has been declared or who was declared disqualified, could remove himself, what is so amazing about, what is so extraordinary about the position of the President of a bar association that he refuses
to appear before the judge?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it is this. If you were going to talk about rule of law, then that rule of law applies equally to every citizen, even if he's a lawyer. And the attitude, and you were right in pointing out that the Chief Justice Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry's restoration and the whole lawyers movement is where this starts. We've seen some extraordinary scenes and extraordinary incidents in the courts and even otherwise. Lawyers get together and beat up policemen.
Absolutely.
That's happened regularly. Lawyers attacking judges in the lower judiciary. lawyers beating up their clients.
Or even locking up judges in their chambers.
Exactly.
That has also happened.
And that kind of attitude, this attitude that you can mob the court and then get whatever decision you want to get. This is the kind of, I mean, earlier this year, this same Lahore High Court Bar Association actually attacked Pemra because they were conducting a proceeding against one of the TV anchors who had gone against a religious minority. And the lawyers in Lahore High Court got together, Lahore High Court Bar Association. They attacked Pemra and they almost lynched members of that religious minority right there and then. This was the kind of unbelievable kind behavior. Of attitude, and this is not becoming, this is conduct unbecoming of an officer of court. An officer of the court has to conduct himself with certain amount of dignity and certain amount of grace.
If the lawyers who are supposed to uphold the rule of law are the ones that are flaunting it, then what can we expect from an ordinary citizen in the streets, sir?
See, we are not setting good examples, let's be very frank. And indeed, seen in the national perspective, whatsoever is happening in the...
Isn't it that the lawyers have to uphold the dignity of the courts?
Oh, sure. Why
so
not?
Then when they behave in such a way, are they not undermining the entire dignity of the court? And not only that, but they're undermining the entire institution so that people will lose faith in it completely, sir.
We absolutely, nobody can disagree to this position, this point of view. We have to uphold the dignity of the institution, and institution forms of the bar and the bench both. So that way, it's absolutely not healthy, as I just stated in the beginning, and it's very unfortunate. But what I'm just worried that the concerned quarters from the bench and the bar, they are not at all taking care of all this very serious issue. Because
again comes back to the judicial reform process, because it is part of the reform process, or is it in fact something new that has come up because somebody would not even envisaged such a problem developing?
Once again, I would say the problem, as a matter of fact, is that the whole society, all the segments of the society, indeed, are heading towards an indiscipline. And we have seen it very recently, and every day we are witnessing it with open eyes. There should be no second opinion about that. Why shouldn't it affect this community as well? So that means that the judiciary as well as the bar, being very, very important department of national life and playing pivotal role in harnessing the things in connection with justice and fair play, they have to be more responsible. You see, certain areas are where you can be casual, herein you cannot be. So it will be only possible if there is a discipline in the institution in both the areas, one, and secondly, both the judiciary as well as the bar, I mean bench and the bar, they coordinate, they cooperate, and very frequently they see that any irregularity in discipline or illegality, wheresoever it is there, it shouldn't be immediately remedied. See what is happening. In the bar councils, complaints, they are there. Nobody cares about that. In the Supreme Judicial Council, there are complaints about the judges. And very few of them are taken care on time, and maybe I use this word very carefully, appropriately. So, unless there is really an arrangement to time and again see to it that you examine all these cases, case-to-case basis, and of course to see the reasons and the causes, and then to eradicate all those things which are
so in your opinion,
basis
sir,
of all
in
that.
your opinion, sir, what kind of action should be taken against the lawyers who've taken the law in their own hands and have acted in this most heinous way, I would say? What would you recommend, sir?
My personal opinion is it should not be possible only from the bar councils and the bar associations. It will be only possible if there is a reasonably practicable cooperation between bench and the bar. Because if one of these two departments or one of the parts of the department, if it takes things from its own point of view, considers it and decides, as normally is happening, or the bar They go for a certain thing, certain decision in their own way, in their own mindset. This tension, this controversy, and this hooliganism and illegality is not going to be within the controllable limits. I think it is high time that the bench as well as bar at all levels, they should start thinking in terms of close cooperation and coordination in connection with these cases and incidents.
There's another very unfortunate aspect of our judicial system, sir, and I wanted to raise that, and I'll bring first this question to Yasir and then obviously to you as well, sir. And it's become kind of a joke in our society, sir. People go to the courts to seek justice, and then they die, and then their second generation is going to the court in the same case, and they die again, and then third generation. So that's like a span of 50 years we're talking about where people don't get justice. And there's an adage about justice that justice delayed is justice denied. But here we have a situation where you have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of cases that are similar. You go to court one day to get justice and then you're stuck there for the rest of your life. Can you comment on that? Why is that the situation that every Pakistani citizen has to be dealing with?
You know, when I started practicing law, my seniors told me that there were two things that you need to do to be an effective lawyer. One, get a stay order. Two, then delay the case, get adjournments. This is your criteria in this country for being a good lawyer. One, getting a stay order and then delaying the case as long as possible. So this is what is happening, unfortunately.
So that's what you were taught in your schools, said that you make the clients, or not in your institutions, but in your colleagues or
amongst my seniors. This is the understanding that one has.
It's like what you're saying is the equivalent of when you take your car to a mechanic when it gets, when there's something wrong with it, and the mechanic purposely does something else with it, so
Absolutely.
that you keep going back to the same mechanic to keep getting your car fixed for the rest of your life. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Delaying tactics.
Unbelievable.
Delaying tactics is what most of these great lawyers that you have, those who've made a name, I don't want to name anyone, but that's what they're good at, getting a stay order and then delaying the matters indefinitely. And if you can do that, you consider an effective lawyer. Now, the reason for that is that there is a rule within this, the Civil Procedure Code which allows adjournments. If these adjournments could somehow be curbed, if, for example, there were the notion...
Isn't there a cap on how many adjournments you can take, or you could keep adjourning it till kingdom come, we'll wait till...
Well, if you can come up with an imaginative enough reason, you can probably delay the matters indefinitely. There are
well,
ways...
we have those cases obviously hanging out in the courts where you have people going to court for 50... In fact, there was a story in the newspaper very recently where a judgment was given, and the people who had filed the case were all dead in that particular case.
Right, and there is, and I know of several cases. There are cases related to the evacuee properties, for example, from partition that are still going on, where you have third and fourth generations now fighting the case, whereas they started with their grandparents or great-grandparents.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of situation there is, and this is unfortunate because everywhere else, especially in the UK or the US, you have this idea of block dates. You try a case and then you get on with it. You don't try and indefinitely
keep it lingering on.
Yeah. Exactly. And so that is unfortunately the case here, where you've essentially made the idea of litigation a bargaining tool. So you don't litigate because you want a decision on the matter necessarily. You litigate because that gives you something of a leverage on a bargaining, counter, or when you're discussing the matter or negotiating with the other side.
So it seems, and Ikram Sahib, if you could help me with this, what Yasir is saying, it seems to me that the system, the law, the institution of justice is designed to protect criminals rather than to catch them or to prosecute them. It is designed in such a way that the innocent victims or those who have been wronged will die seeking justice and never get it. That's the way it seems to be not working, rather.
I may not agree with you very respectfully. Basically, as far as I am concerned, I've seen most of the laws on civil, criminal and constitutional side. As a matter of fact, maybe there are certain flaws, But on the whole, there is nothing wrong with the laws. But the enforcement of law, that is the issue. Now, enforcement of law while the cases are being processed and conducted in the courts, and thereafter, of course, when the implementation stage comes. Unfortunately, over past 20, 25 years, last 20, 25 years, I'm observing most of the people in different departments, they have stopped working in accordance with discipline of the department. So judiciary suffers the same fate, I must say. See, there was time when the judges were very particular about the adjournments, which has been just stated by my friend. And the law, of course, doesn't permit adjournments infrequently. If there is a justifiable cause, of course, a date could be extended. But unfortunately, now there is a casual attitude on the part of the learned judges as well. One, and of course, my own community, the lawyers representing the parties, of course, they have their own role. And the litigants too, they have also a role in the whole scheme, which is causing delay in the adjudication process and disposal of cases. A delay which you have just mentioned, I think we can definitely curb these areas, these difficulties we can definitely remove. We can reduce at least uncalled for difficulties. But unfortunately, since every department of national life, one way or the other, is suffering from these anomalies and irregularities and maybe to some extent illegalities, because ultimately an anomaly would lead to an illegality.
Absolutely.
So that way, my view is that we have to bring in the discipline, since we are today discussing the judicial system, the judicial reforms.
It's been 70 years, sir, since the creation of Pakistan.
See,
don't you think it's high time that was done?
It's high time. See, there was time, I remember very well, when we started practice in the district courts, there was absolutely no concept that a judge would not be there at 7:30 if the time of the opening of the courts is 7:30.
Right.
And there was no concept that a lawyer would not appear in the case when his case is called.
Right.
Now, as a matter of fact, what to say of senior lawyers, in the junior lawyers, their clerks and XYZ, they are appearing and cases are being either adjourned or delayed on the day for the next call, etc. So I think we have to overhaul, on the whole, all these areas which are relevant for the purposes. Just saying that we have a judicial policy.
Now, whose responsibility would that be, Ikram? So let me ask this question from Yasir, and then I'll come to you about it as well. Yasir,
one sentence.
Please, sir.
Because it is relevant in this context.
Please go ahead.
You see, there was time that we had the administrative judges in the districts and the divisions from the High Court. High Court would appoint certain judges, and they used to visit districts and the divisions and see different files at random, different courts they will be visiting without informing that they are coming. And of course, there was a reasonable, I must say, apprehension on the part of all concerned that they may be checked and they may be ultimately, if found,
penalized.
They would be penalized. I think that system has also been almost it's not there, almost. I think it has departed, gone with the wind, I must say. So I think if you see the things.
But this is going to have very tragic consequences for the entire growth of our society towards being a civilized society. And when the common man will see these anomalies in such a prestigious and respectable institution.
You see, we go for seminars, the conferences, papers are read. Me, you, and everybody else would be participating. But all those are bound in the books, in the magazines, etc. They would be there. But implementation, we lack in this particular area.
That's a very, very important thing, sir. That's where people start losing respect for institutions. Yasir, what's your opinion on the matter? Whose responsibility is it to fix it?
Look, this very system, the system that we have right now, worked wonderfully well a couple of decades ago. We're talking about, so let's say 5 decades ago. Now, if you pick up...
No, but it's not, that can't be true, because if there are people who are fourth generations of people who are still fighting their cases, then I think it's from day one that the things haven't been really the way they should be.
The things have deteriorated because, you see, if you pick up judgments from the British era, before partition, and you look at them, there are always cost orders. Orders for costs if you have either come in frivolously or if you've delayed the matters unnecessarily. None of the judgments, or at least the judgments that I've seen in recent years, have the cost order. No judge has ever ordered a litigant to pay costs to the other litigant for wasting the court time or wasting the other litigant's time. So I think that has to come back in for this judicial system to work effectively for every party concerned. Secondly, I think in terms of the responsibility, I think the responsibility lies both with the judiciary and the legislature. I think the judiciary, the top judiciary and the chief judges in every province, and then the chief judge of the country, Chief Justice of Pakistan, they all have to come together and take these matters and overhaul the system top down, because there are a lot of problems. The fish rots from the top, as it were. So there are a lot of problems that need to be resolved at the very top as well. So that, I think, has to be done. But also the legislature. I think the legislature has to give definite policy in terms of how the judicial system would be reformed. Because, you see, the British who gave this system, the system that we are following, gave us a civil procedure code in 1898.
1860.
That is the Pakistan
Criminal Procedure Code.
Pakistan Penal Code. The criminal procedure is 1908, or I think 1898 is the criminal procedure and 1908 is the civil procedure. Since then, Britain itself has changed its civil procedure several times. And now, if you look at their civil procedure code in England, it is the simplest of laws that you can imagine. Anyone, you don't have to have a law degree to actually read the civil procedure code, and you'll get it, you'll understand what it says. Whereas we are still operating with procedure codes that were written in the Victorian era.
Right.
And in English language that has itself evolved, we
can't even understand what's being written in
exactly.
it anymore.
And it's so archaic and so at times pointless going through that sort of thing. So I think all of these things need to be resolved, but there has to be a will, and you don't have that will because what you haven't had in this country is continuity of democracy, and that goes back to the whole question of the crisis of the state that we've had. That is what is affecting us. Even India, if you take up Indian example, which is they won the freedom at the same time, had the same laws. They've updated many of their laws. They've simplified many of they have a National Law Commission that comes up with reports which are then actually implemented. We merely copy their laws. So we often just take a law that has already been passed in India and we basically copy it and
we don't even implement that.
Well,
because that's the important thing that Ikram Saab has raised, that the laws are on the face of it not so bad, but it's just the fact that whether it's any kind of law, it's never implemented. And implementation has been a problem, not just in terms of the judicial system, but it would be across the board. For example, we don't even implement basic laws of, let's say, wearing a seatbelt or not littering on the roads and things like that. I think that's where we need to begin.
Absolutely, and it's when you stop running the red light.
Absolutely.
That I think is a huge issue. So I mean, this is an entire attitude, an attitude towards lawlessness that prevails in this country.
And it's a very dangerous trend that we are witnessing, because that is how societies disintegrate once the respect for the law diminishes completely in the hearts and minds of the citizens.
But who would be there? As a matter of fact, seen from my angle, it will be always the role models. And role models are not only the politicians. It will be from all the departments of national life. And I still remember a teacher of mine who gave me a very severe beating. When I was in class 4, I was monitor. He said, well, your question is wrong. Somehow I said, well, my question is right. Maybe the others, the whole class, no, you are wrong. And I got whatsoever I got. And I obeyed, and ultimately he understood, no, I was right, the class was. I have respect till today for his discipline, coming to school in time, one, very dignified attitude, and taking care of everyone in the class, irrespective of the caste or creed, etc. So these role models, they have gone with the wind. You have, apart from laws, there is ethics, there are morality. We have almost gone, I must say, to zero in all departments of life. So we need role models, and if they are there, definitely there will be an impact and effect. And of course, when you will be following laws, there will be another big effect on the whole system, on the communities as well as the national order.
You're very right,
we are
sir.
Suffering today.
You're absolutely
is
right.
Because of that. It is whether it is judiciary or the executive or the legislature. Are they legislating in the parliament?
Well, there are big questions, and it all comes down to the governance that unfortunately Pakistan has not been able to be governed.
But in particular reference to the legal system, I think there was a great initiative a couple of years ago, not a couple of years, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where they were setting up a national law university. Unfortunately, that was shot down by the then law minister, Mr. Babar Awan, who said,
who himself is a lawyer.
Who said it is an absolute useless endeavor.
Unbelievable.
And that is the kind of thing, you haven't allowed a theory of law to establish in this country.
Thank you for bringing that up, but unfortunately we're out of time. But this subject is so vast that we'll do some more shows covering this issue. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd like to say that judicial reforms is the way. We've been waiting as citizens of this country for the long-awaited reforms that still haven't taken place, and obviously we want Pakistan to be governed properly. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye. It's the complete opposite.
There is a difference. There is a difference. They may not be going all out, or for that matter, they're not even taking interest as far as the Kashmir problem is concerned. But they also do not want the relations between India and Pakistan to reach a point where, it can get dangerous because of the nuclear factor, because of their strategic interests in the region, and so on and so forth. So I think there are several considerations which come into play while dealing with India and Pakistan. And the same also are reflected in how they look at the problem of Kashmir. You see, we have to also be very realistic about it. As far as Kashmir is concerned, it's not hurting them. That is very, although I mean it's a matter that you very rightly have pointed out, and I think how many times the PTV and all other channels in Pakistan has been echoing that all over the world. We sent, I think, the delegation to, I don't know, 22 countries and all the important countries of the world. We bring it at every forum. We remind the United Nations.
But it seems that the Indian propaganda is far stronger or better than ours.
Well, I think it's not just the propaganda. It's the the strategic interests of the major powers that is more important, and that is how India plays that game. And if the strategic interests were not there, I tell you, it would have been a very different, as we have seen in the case of so many other disputed territories. Look at Palestine. Look at the way that Palestine has been handled. I mean, to me, it is such a shame. So I think these two major areas, Kashmir and Palestine, the ones in which the world, and especially the Western world, is not interested, they seem to be completely neglected and ignored, and their people are humiliated, their people are arrested, their people don't have jobs, and in every way they are being exploited, not only by Indians and by the Israelis, but by the international community as well.
A very sad remark, sir.
One thing that I would like to add, which is a counterintuitive thought. It took slavery to be delegitimized almost 300 years.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're still suffering the after effects.
But
hangover
by and
continues.
large, but by and large, you know, slavery has disappeared. Slavery has become such a moral stigma now that anybody who claims that he owns slaves, whether it is domestic slavery, in other forms it does exist, but by and large slavery has been discarded. Number one. Number two, it took almost 1 century to delegitimize the colonial struggles, the phenomenon of colonialism.
Absolutely.
So taking a cue from that, I hope that we wouldn't have to wait for another 200 years or 100 more years for the Kashmiris to find their freedom or their expression to right to self-determination. But Kashmiris, India's moral and ethical hold on Kashmir is getting weaker by the day. Even though militarily, politically, economically, we may find India to be an insurgent or a resurgent power, but their ethical and moral authority to hold Kashmiris in bondage is getting weaker by the day.
Very well said, sir, and we'll leave it at that. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and being on the show. Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd like to say that the only way forward for both India and Pakistan, and especially for the Kashmiris, is to sit down and find a workable solution for the peace of our generations to come. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.
By other international organizations like RAW or the NDS or other such outfits, that is something which falls in the domain of intelligence agencies. I'm sure they're mindful of it. I'm sure they're tracking the flow of money, and they are reducing it or choking it as much as they possibly can, I think they have a focus on this, and they are making headways over here.
Well, sir, unfortunately, we're out of time, and we can't really talk about the other various points. Like, we have at least 15 more points of the National Action Plan to discuss. But thank you very much for taking out the time and being on the show. Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd like to say that the government needs to be very serious when it comes to confronting terrorism in the country and focus on education and educational reforms as well. We leave it at that. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.